horse.
So, old Burf turned into a rhinoceros, did he? Ha! Ha! And what if he did it on purpose, eh? What if he did it on purpose? He had a secret side to him deep down that he kept himself. Well, whether he turned into a rhinoceros on purpose or against his will, he's probably the better for it. You always see the black side of everything. It obviously gave him great pleasure to turn into a rhinoceros. There's nothing extraordinary about that. Rhinoceros are living creatures the same as us. They have as much right to live as we do. Are you under the impression our way of life is superior? I hate moral standards. Nature has its own laws. Morality is against nature. We must return to primeval integrity. What's wrong with being a rhinoceros? I'm all for change. I'm not a victim of prejudice like you. Oh, hot, far too hot. Demolish the lot. Our clothes itch. How they itch. Oh, the swamps. I'll trample you. I'll trample you. It's happened again, hasn't it? Oh, let me tell you, this afterlife is a queer business, most peculiar. You know, when you get a flash of memory for no apparent reason, just pops into your head. Well, it's like that, except you don't just remember things, you live them again. And you never know what's going to happen next, or when. A bit of a scunner. Now, rhinoceros was quite an adventure. We, John Macrae, from Calkin via Glasgow, working with Laurence Olivier and Orson Welles. As an ardent admirer of Welles's genius, I leapt at the chance. I went for Welles, but I stayed for Olivier. Another attraction was that the play had recently been performed in France by my theatrical hero, Jean-Louis Barrault. Now, you'll have seen him in Les Enfants du Paradis. So, down I went with a skip in my step to the Royal Court Theatre. Wells had so many ideas, too many ideas. There was a fiendishly elaborate set with swinging doors and trapdoors and TV monitors, trick mirrors and all sorts of special effects. And he kept changing his mind. No, that's not working. Let's try it this way. Oh, I know. Exasperating and ruins to the confidence. Oh, but his big idea was overlapping dialogue. We spent days working on that. Oh, our scripts ended up looking like orchestra scores, different coloured dots all over the place. When he starts there, I say that, and she says that. When I start here, oh, I felt as though my feet had been nailed to the floor. A cloud descended on the company. But at the start of the last week of rehearsals, Olivier said to Welles in front of the entire company, "You must go away, Orson, and not come back to rehearsals because you're upsetting us all." Welles was bouleversé. I mean, there was no explosion, no confrontation. Olivier took charge of rehearsals, gave the production shape, gave us back our confidence, and Welles focused his energies on the design of the show, which he was also doing. Oh, he had recordings of jazz drums and thundering rhinoceroses, flushing lavatories, roaring crowds, 500 sound cues. The man was a genius, but because of his absence from rehearsals, several light and sound effects hadn't been fixed in time for the opening night. So, to cope with that, and I suspect as a way of getting revenge on Olivier, Welles made himself a wee nest up in the dress circle and sat there behind a black curtain, having apologised to the audience for the inevitable fact that no theatre production is ever truly complete. And speaking into a walkie-talkie in a thunderous whisper the entire theatre could hear, He gave directions for sound and light and instructions to cast and crew. Louder, louder, lower the curtain. Turn up the music, more rhino roars, more. But it was a great big hit. Kenneth Tynan said the production was dashingly and unmistakably by Orson Welles. On the last night at the end of the run, Welles threw a fantastically baroque party to which he invited all sorts of impossibly glamorous people. Peggy was invited too, so down she came to London, giddy as a schoolgirl to be in such glittering company. All the cast were given a wee pottery rhinoceros made by Wells's wife, Paula Mori, an elegant reminder of a chaotic experience. And after that, Peggy and I took the girls off to Paris for 6 days, our only family. It's like a dream come true. I can hardly tack it in. Both was giant the papist lords for Spanish gold. To think o't, my worst enemy destroyed by his own folly. All my troubles washed awa by a turn of the tide. His will's as clear as the licht o' day. He has pinted me out as his earthly lieutenant. Oh, fortune's favoured me the day. There's Nathan and my wife, and all that I dreamed o' is promised at last. Both well on the scaffold, the papists hunded doon. England a hint me the kirk in my poor, and in the end the dream o' my life come true. Oh, it gars my pulse quick and it gars my heart loup. It gars my een fill with tears to think of the twa paired countries they fought and struggled together, to think of the blood they hae shed atween them, the tombs they hae blackened with fire, the bonny green house they hae laid waste, and then to think, as ae day it shall come to pass, that I, Jamie Stewart, will ride to London and the twa countries shall become ane. Oh, it's a solemn thought. But the old bitch isn't deep yet. Well, here's to the day. May the Maudies soon tickle her tails. 1937, the Curtain Theatre. I was 32 years old and already an amateur veteran, but what a gift that part was, and what a joy it was to work in Scots, especially the zesty, poetic Scots Robert McClellan wrote, what some folk call Lallans or Lallan. Dear to my heart is the peat-reek, all this Tantalum, as Stevenson says. Now, before Jane VI, I didn't speak Scots. My family was largely Gaelic speaking, and because I'd gone to a good school, I spoke Scottish English. Oh, my family, by the by, were also Calvinists. There were altogether far too many wee free Sabbatarians cluttering up the place. You were barely allowed to cough on a Sunday. And at every meal a place was laid for the silent guest. Anyway, at first McClellan didn't want me for his play because he thought my education had been too English and I wouldn't be able to do justice to the Scots, but I learned it and I learned to love it. And I became convinced that its regular use was essential to the establishment of a national Scottish theatre, which could be an authentic voice for an authentic Scottish culture. The Scots language is key to creating an independent theatre style. Its use encourages the development of a unique acting style. And the best way to keep Scots alive generally is to hear it heard spoken on stage. It's not just about speaking Scots, of course, but talking about Scotland and Scottish culture and Scottish politics. My life is devoted to the abolition of English domination, English interference. There was a speech I had in Whiskey Galore, a much better film in my opinion, a more truly Scottish film than Whiskey Galore. There was a speech I had anyway that I rather liked. They'll be putting me out of the croft that I and my family have held for 342 years. What Clan Rory could never do, what MacNeil of Barra couldn't do, What John Knox couldn't do for 400 years, what the bloody redcoats couldn't do after Culloden. Take back your eviction notice and tell them what they can do with their little pieces of paper. My first attempts at speechifying were made on draughty street corners on Saturday nights. If I'd been a wee bit older, I could have spoken on Glasgow Green, where all the great orators performed, folk like John Macrae. On a Sunday night, up to 100,000 people gathered there. But in 1922, Glasgow Corporation invoked an old law restricting public assembly, and that was the end of that. So Saturday nights found me on a soapbox preaching the odds on behalf of the Scottish National Party. The fight was not always glorious. One miserable wet and windy night when my oratorical powers struck me as being at their highest, I played to an audience of a drunk man, 2 old wives and 2 snotty-nosed wains who should have been in their beds. Peggy was quite the activist too from her school days, outspoken and game for an argy-bargy. She was part of a radical women's group, the Library Sect. And when she graduated, she led a march to the education headquarters in Bath Street, protesting against the lack of opportunities for Scottish teachers. She was always busy at something, fighting injustice and unkindness. Stop and be quiet for a moment and listen to me. I don't need to know any more, and neither do you. This girl killed herself and died a horrible death, but each of you helped to kill her. Always remember that, never forget it. No, I don't think any of you will forget. Well, Eva Smith's gone. You can't do her any more harm now, nor can you do her any good. You can't even say, I'm sorry, Eva Smith. But just remember this, one Eva Smith has gone. But there are millions and millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths still here with us, with their lives, their hopes and fears, their suffering and chance of happiness, all tangled up with our lives and what we think and say and do. We don't live alone. We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. And I tell you that the day will soon come when, if man will not learn that lesson, then he will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. Good night. I was the first actor to play Inspector Gould after the West End run with Ralph Richardson. The reviews were immensely flattering. That was the same year as the Air Experiment, now 1947. Now, the Glasgow Citizens Theatre took a season of 5 plays to the Air Gaiety, and I appeared in 3 of them, including revivals of Jamie the Saxt and James Bridie's Mr. Balfrey. The experiment was a great success, but the next... Have you ever been to Millport, on the island of Great Cumbria, on the Ayrshire coast? The place to go if you live in Glasgow. Grand place for a family holiday, with Peggy and the girls. Come along now, girls, don't keep Daddy waiting. It's a lovely day for a walk. And Christine! Ah, there you are. Yes, I know it's Sunday, but that's no excuse for being lazy. While Mummy's at church, we can get some exercise. Now, are you dressed for a good long walk? Yes, well done, excellent. Now, Christine, darling, would you close the door, please? Now, take my hands. Ready? Off we go. What, darling? No, Daddy's not walking too fast. You're walking too slow. Come along now. Let's really get some air in our lungs. Oh, look, and look. What's that flower? That one over there. The funny wee spiny red and yellow one. A sundew. That's right. Good girl. Oh, look, girls, look. A golden eagle. There. Ah, away he goes. Very lucky to see one of them. Right. Chop, chop. In In 1948, when the second Edinburgh Festival came round, there was a strong feeling that there needed to be a significant Scottish contribution. The only Scottish representation the year before had been a few amateur companies that had performed at the same time as the festival. They called themselves the Festival Adjuncts. So, James Bridie, Robert Kemp and Tyrone Guthrie were tasked with coming up with something. And in the end, they settled on a satire of the Three Estates, a 16th century morality play, to be performed in the Assembly Hall of the Church of Scotland. Ticket sales were slow at first. At the end of the play, the vices are hanged, all except Flattery, who has talked his way out of a jam, and assists in the hanging of his erstwhile chums, Deceit and Fawcett. Have I not scaped the witty wheel? Yea, that I have, by sweet St. Gill. For I had not been ranged, because deserved I be All Hallows to have been marshalled with my fellows, and he aboon them hanged. When I had owned my freer's hood, all men believe it I was good. But I made far more faults than my mates. I beguiled all the Three Estates with my hypocrisy. Mark weel, my fears hae paid their all, but Flattery slips clean a wall. Oh, all the world, I'm free. Bridie had thrust a copy of the play into Kemp's hands. You must read this. Now, Kemp had to reduce the huge text to a nifty 2 hours, which he did with great skill, and remained completely faithful to the spirit of the thing. Guthrie's production was superb. We had a wonderful company of Scottish actors: Bryden, Murdoch, Molly Urquhart, Lennox Milne, Stanley Baxter, and we had a hit. Guthrie was an extraordinary man, a bit of an exotic, part Scottish, part Irish, but with an immaculate cut-glass accent acquired at Wellington College and Cambridge. He was 6'4" and went about in a jumper and sandals. And trousers. Anyway, he had liked my quince in The Dream at the Citizens, and he cast me in 2 parts in the satire, Flattery and the Pardoner, and for the first time I got noticed by the major critics in the national papers. But more importantly, that production put Scottish theatre on the international map. It was the smash hit of that year's festival. House full signs even at matinees. 80% of the tickets sold that year were for the Three Estates. On the first night when we were taking our curtain call, someone overheard Bridie saying to himself, "Now, Lord, lettest thou thy servant depart in peace." Oh, at the end, when Fawcett is hanged, there's a wonderful stage direction. "Here shall he be histed up, and a craw shall be casting up, as it were his soul." Well, here we are again, still having to make skirmishes on behalf of the Fringe. The Festival Society must let the Fringe in. The likes of Blind-Born Opera are very splendid, of course, but they're a bit of luxury and glamour far beyond the means of most people. Let's have something for the lowbrows too, eh? Fringe shows should appeal to those people who cannot afford the main shows. And at a fringe show, people can hear language not far removed from their own language. We must always have at the forefront of our minds the customers. All the customers. There is a great need for a culture which matters to the majority of the population. And then which I read recently that the great English composer Ralph Vaughan Williams recently described the Edinburgh Festival as the Snobopolis Festival. Something has to be done. The Festival Society aren't ashamed of Arthur's Seat or Scotch whisky, but they seem to be ashamed of Scottish drama. And the main criticism they make against Scottish plays is, oh, no one ever goes to see them anyway. Well, I have proved that criticism to be false. Touring the country from Inverness to Hawick with my own touring company, Scottish shows, I produced Bachelors Are Bold and Johnny Juke the Gibbet by T.M. Watson, Bridie's Gog and Magog, which was that year's hit show, playing to full houses every night, and Alexander Reed's The World's Wonder, which, playing at a variety theatre, broke all records, drawing an audience of 31,000 people, 6,000 more than any other show on the festival. So, you see, there is an audience for Scottish plays. And while I'm about it, I may as well add that I am always wanting to see, and I am still demanding to see, a film unit set up in Scotland, capable of making feature pictures in which all the credits are Scottish, and in which the Scottish character is not unnaturally represented, unlike the rotten films that I've been in. The prime duty of the Festival Society should be to put on something Scottish. The least we can do as hosts is to show what we can do ourselves. If the festival is to amount to anything more than merely a commercial proposition, this fellow is wise enough to play the fool. This fellow is wise enough to play the fool. And to do that well craves a kind of wit. And to do that well craves a kind of wit. This fellow is wise enough to play the fool, and to do that well craves a kind of wit. He must observe their mood, on whom he jests, the quality of persons and the time, and like the haggard, check at every feather that comes before his eye. This is a practice as full of labour as a wise man's art. What, mum? Yes, I'll be careful. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I was supposed to be studying engineering, but at the end of my first year I knew that I would not be an engineer. I had the acting bug. It probably started with pantomime starring Tommy Long. Now, my family had inherited the Calvinist disapproval of theatre, but somehow there were always annual visits to the pantomime at the Princess's Theatre in the Gorbals. And after a triumph playing Puss in Boots at school, there was never any doubt in my mind. But there was no such thing as Scottish professional theatre. You couldn't earn a living at it. Aspiring Scottish actors either had to audition in London or try for a job with an English repertory theatre. The best you could do otherwise was to try for walk-on parts with visiting English companies led by the likes of Sir John Martin Harvey. It is a far, far better thing that I do now than I have ever done, etc. That's what a pal and I did. That's how we spent most of our spare time. I knew I wanted to study acting seriously, but I could only do it as an amateur. And I knew I didn't want to spend the rest of my time being an engineer. So, when I graduated, I worked for a year in a shipyard, and then I enrolled at John Hill College for a 2-year course to be a primary school teacher. I thought I could make a decent fist of that. And there I met Anne McAllister, and my life changed forever. She taught voice production and phonetics. She gave me my first chance to study acting in a disciplined and concentrated sort of way. A few of us who'd been inspired by her formed, with her help, the Torch Theatre, and we had great fun doing plays, well out of the usual run of things. I did shows with them for about 6 years, continuing long after I'd left college. I took to teaching like a duck to water. Tried as much as possible to avoid a regimented approach. I tried to encourage the children to think, to be aware, to experience things. Sometimes I'd stop halfway through a lesson and make them listen to the clanking rhythm of the riveters in the shipyard. Or I'd take them to a concert conducted by Beecham or Barbarolli. Sometimes I'd read Shakespeare to them. Never once did I feel that I was hammering wooden pegs into brass skulls, as a cynical colleague once put it. And every minute of my spare time was given over to studying acting and directing, and preaching the need for a national theatre for Scotland. Amateur theatre was booming, clubs springing up all over the place like dandelions, and often lasting not much longer. The little theatre opened at the Quay at Hardy Institute. Oh, and Bertie Pollock, who'd been to Moscow and seen the work of Stanislavski, founded the Tron Theatre Club. Playing Suleoni there was the first time I got really widely noticed. But the Tron too eventually disbanded. But the project, the Glasgow Theatre Arts Club and the Curtain Theatre all grew out of it. And at the Curtain I played Jane the Saxt for the first time. And my life suffered a sea change into something rich and strange. The play was an enormous success for McLaren and me. But after a year, the call up for the war and shaky finances meant that Agnes, lay by your work and hearken to me. Lift up your head a wee and tilt your face. There. Now, watch me as I speak, and profit by it to the very hindmost syllable. Agnes, I'm going to wed ye, and it behoves you 100 times a day to bless the goodness of your destiny, to bear in mind the lakeness of your birth, and at the same time to admire my goodness, because raised ye frae the hoar estate of poor Kintraquine to the rank of an honoured burgess's wife, with the bed and bodily favours of a man who was keeping himself clear of siccan entanglements, and was denied to a score of dainty creatures that honour he would confer upon you. Even I tell you how to for your in the small thing ye'd be were this glorious knot untied, so that the thought of it may all the better teach you to deserve the station I'll set you in. Hae better knowledge of yourself, and to behave, so that I may congratulate myself on the step I'm going to take. Marriage, my dear Agnes, is nae laughing matter. The position of wife carries with it certain dreich devoirs, and it's no man intent to set you in it for their own freedom and pleasure. Womankind was made to be dependent, and all the puissance is on the side of the beard. Robert Kemp wrote that translation for me. The year before, he had seen Louis Jouvet's production of Molière's L'École des Femmes, and he was struck by a similarity in the acting styles between the French actors and myself, and he believed, like I did, that it must be possible to create a unique style, something entire unto itself, distinctive, more physical than the stiff naturalism of English acting. So he wrote Let Wives Tak Tent. A little later, he translated The Miser as the Laird o' Grippy for me. But at the time, I was enjoying some success in commercial pantomime and couldn't do it. Anyway, Let Wives was a great hit at the Citizens Theatre in 1948, and I revived it several times. I was often compared to Jean-Louis Barrault. If you're not careful, that sort of thing can go to your head. Now, Robert Kemp was an Orcadian, a son of the manse, and an extremely talented fellow. He was also a top-notch radio producer, especially of documentaries. I worked on an excellent one he made about the 45 Rebellion. Oh, and he wrote a wonderful play about Robert Burns, that other dear charmer. But it's the Three Estates and Let Wives Tak Tent that bide here. About 10 years after we'd done Let Wives at the Citizens, I was asked to be in a revival at the Edinburgh Gateway Theatre. I did several plays with them over the course of a decade or so. It was a classy company, and they ended up becoming the core of the Lyceum Theatre. Now, during the run of Let Wives, Laurence Olivier was in Edinburgh, and he came to a matinee to see the wild genius. I was sharing a dressing room with Walter Carr, but he was dumbfounded when Laurence Olivier came backstage to say hello. I was having my favourite between-show snack, a bag of Victoria plums. Very good for the heart and bones. So, there we all sat, eating plums out of a paper bag, while Walter listened wide-eyed as Olivier and I exchanged stories about rhinoceros and all the... Peggy, dearest, here I am in London on my first professional engagement as an actor, taking Alistair Sim's £6 a week for doing nothing. It's not that I'm ungrateful, but the role of understudy is a thankless one, and I'm glad it's only for a few weeks. I can't wait to return to you in Glasgow and take up Mr. Bridie's offer of £10 a week. At least it seems that's a long-term contract in theory, though just how long his Glasgow Citizens Theatre project will last, I'm not sure. You will not be marrying the man you met 2 years ago. I shall return to you a new man. J.D.G. Macrae is no more. Mr. Sim says I need a stronger name if I'm to be a professional, and he has suggested I take the stage name Duncan Macrae. What do you think? I'll still be John to family and friends, of course. If the citizen's job turns out to be a long-term thing, this might be the year to leave the teaching behind me. We'll always have your wage coming in. A new life beckons. Marriage, change of career, a great adventure together. Here's to La Vita Nuova. Yours I, John. Well, it did turn out to be a steady thing. I turned professional. We got married, a good year in 1943. At last I could devote myself entirely to acting, all because of Peggy. Almost more than anything, I think I loved Peggy because she did things. We only met because she made it happen. I'd never imagined that being a conscientious objector could have turned out so well. When the war started, I was immediately put to work chaperoning evacuees, and at the start of 1941 I went with a group of handicapped children to Ayres House at Parton in Dumfriesshire. Now Peggy was already there with her pupils. She was feeling low from being lonely and isolated, and the children were missing their parents. One day she was sitting in her room looking out of the window, and she saw yours truly leading a group of children up the path to the house, and being a theatre enthusiast, she recognised J.D.G. Macrae, the Ken Speckle amateur actor, and immediately knew that I was the man for her. Well, that's what she told me, anyway. We returned to Glasgow, and blackouts and rationing and air raid warnings, and we continued to see each other. It was Peggy who suggested that we got engaged, and Peggy who decided when we got married. Thank heaven she did. Nature's been pushing and contriving in other ways too. A number of young people fell in love and got married, and here and there a new home was set up under a roof. Almost everybody in the world gets married. Here in our town there aren't hardly any exceptions. Most everybody climbs into their graves married. Oh, and here comes Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Webb to make breakfast, just as though it was an ordinary day. I don't have to point out to the women in my audience that those two ladies they see before them, both of those ladies cooked 3 meals a day. One for 20 years, one for 40 years. They brought up 2 children apiece, washed, cleaned the house, and never a nervous breakdown. It's like what one of those Middle West poets says. You've got to love life to have life, and you've got to have life to love life. The thing about me and Peggy is a bit like an iceberg. I'm the visible tip. Because of her, I could take up Mr. Bridie's offer of work at the Citizens and the understudy job he got me with Alistair Sim. Bridie and Peggy, I've had a career because of them. But I feel compelled to say that James Bridie was a fraud. In real life, he was Dr. Osborne Maver, a middle-aged Glasgow physician with a wife and 2 children, but his passion was theatre. And when he started to write, he adopted the name James Bridie for this other, more anarchic aspect of himself. Dr. Maver and Mr. Bridie. His plays often dug remarkably deep into the murk of the human soul, and sometimes they just capered. He wrote about 40 in all, ranging from pantomimes to Bible stories and historical dramas and metaphysical fantasies. He wrote screenplays for Alexander Calder and Alfred Hitchcock. And by the time I met him, he'd had several West End hits, and his work was vastly popular. I had joined Molly Urquhart's repertory theatre company in Rutherglen. She did a wide range of plays with a healthy bias in favour of authors with Scottish credentials. It was a great free company. Oh, and it included another failed engineering student, Nicholas Parsons. One day he asked me if I had any advice for him. I said, you should look in the mirror occasionally, study your face, and realise what you can do with it. Anyway, Molly gave me some wonderful roles, including the lead in James Bridie's The Sleeping Clergyman. Now, Bridie was in the habit of coming to see productions of his plays, and he liked my work in The Clergyman. A little later on, I was given the role of John Knox in his play The Anatomist, and that led to Bridie seriously suggesting that I become a professional actor. But at that time, becoming professional in any meaningful way still meant having to go down south, and I felt it was wrong that one had to do that. So after my stint understudying with Alistair Sim, which I justified to myself because the play, the setting and the lead character was Scottish, I decided to stay put until there was a Scottish company I could join. And Bridie made that happen too. In 1943, he founded the Glasgow Citizens Theatre, first at the Athenaeum, and then at the Princess's Theatre in the Gorbals, where I'd seen the pantomimes. The first fully professional theatre company in Scotland. After 20 years of Amdram, I was a pro, earning £10 a week. Armed with my contract for London and my offer of work from Bridie, I chucked in my teaching job, and because the citizens were under local authority control, I continued to have military exemption. Now, the idea for the citizens began with Winifred Bannister in 1942. There's been an ever-increasing demand for a civic theatre in Glasgow. Of course, starting a brand new theatre during a world war was dismissed as daft, but she persisted. Bridie and others came on board, a committee was formed with Bridie as chairman, and they got down to fundraising. With Peggy's encouragement, I wrote offering to help and asking Bridie's advice about turning professional. And as you know, that all turned out very well indeed. The very next year, we opened with Bridie's play, Holy Isle. Now, perhaps you need to be an actor fully to appreciate Bridie's brilliance. But in 7 years at the Citizens, many of my best parts were in his plays. Father Innocence in Holy Isle, not a great play perhaps, but a great showcase for me. Donald McAlpin in The Forrigan Reel, a huge success, in which I played a simple sheepherd who cured disturbed people by means of wild Terpsichorean exercises, what can only be called dance therapy. Dr. Angelus, the Glasgow poisoner, and better than all of these, Harry Magog, the McGonagall-inspired poet and tragedian in Gog and Magog. When I revived it at the Edinburgh Festival in 1954, we played to 2,000 people every night and turned hundreds away. Richard III, on the eve of the Battle of Agincourt. Now, you mind in the play a lot of ghosts come, and they tell Richmond he's going to do fine, and they tell Richard that he's in for it. When our scene opens, the blood and thirsty monarch is in a troubled state in his tent. Oh, God. Ah, oh, oh. No. No. Give me the horse, bind up my wounds, have mercy, Jesu. Soft I did but dream. The clammy hand of conscience doth afflict me, the lights burn blue. It is the middle of the night, when graveyards yawn and hell itself breathes forth congestion to the world. Cold clammy drops of perspiration stand on my feverish hide. Richard loves Richard. In other words, I am me. Is there a murderer here? No. Yes. Oh, then I must fly. What, from myself? Ha 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 ha! Good gracious, why? I love myself. Well, for any good that I myself have done unto myself. Oh no, oh no, no, no. I hate myself. For dark and direful deeds I done myself. My conscience hath a million separate tongues, and every one says I'm a villain. Perjuice of the most perjured type. I see my sins come crowding into court, all bellowing, guilty, 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 guilty. I'm in black despair. Nobody loves me. And if I die, there's nobody to hold my hand or soothe my fevered brow. And why should they, seeing as how myself can find within myself no pity for myself? Oh, methought I saw the ghosts of all that I had murdered come to my tent, and every one did threaten a bloody vengeance on proud Richard's head. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more. You cataracts and hurricaneos spout like whales upon a fretful porpentine. What care these roarers for the name of king? For Gloucester never did, he never shall lie at the proud feet of a corn curer. Farewell the trump, the spirit-stirring drum. Pillow your faces, and upon this charge cry God for Richard, Scotland and St. George. Say that I love not wisely but too well. I was the noblest Roman of them all. Richmond! Ha 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 ha! I'll have the villain's heart out. A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse! Ah! I die. Good night, sweet prince. Good night. Good night. Good night. And flights of angels bear thee to my rest. The rest is silence. I'm dying each day. Dying. Get thee to Milford Haven. Oh, I die. Oh, for heaven's sake. Oh, dear. Now, where? Oh, that's good. Oh, right now. Where am I now? Oh, yes. Now, in 1946, I took a wee hiatus from the Citizens Theatre to make my first film, The Brothers. It was based on a novel about a Hebridean family torn apart by jealousy and rivalry. I played the bad brother. I had to work very hard to make my acting fit into the camera. We took the ferry from Kyle of Lochash over the sea to Skye, and were greeted by gleeful islanders and a great big bearded fellow in full Highland fig. He was the company's location manager, James Robertson Justice. Long before his days as a renowned character actor. Well, the islanders were fantastically hospitable and threw rambunctious caillies in our honour. There was no shortage of eating, drinking and dancing while we were there. Now, The Brothers is the only film you will ever see with death by stolen goose. Yeah. For those of you of an English persuasion, that's a gannet. It's a method of execution suggested by my character, who ultimately suffered the same fate. He recommended it as a punishment for an informer who had revealed illegal whiskey trafficking on the island. Now the Clype is bound hand and foot with cork floats under his oxters and a fish tied to his cap, and he's sent bobbing out to sea to await a passing solan goose who will spot the fish and dive hundreds of feet to pierce fish, cap and skull in one lethal movement. A horrible way to go. Unfortunately, much amusement has been given to some viewers of the play over the years by my character only referring to the instrument of death as a goose. Not quite so terrifying. Death by goose. A wee cock sparrow sat in a tree. A wee cock sparrow sat in a tree. A wee cock sparrow sat in a tree, chirping awa as blithe as could be. Along came a boy with a bow and an arrow. Along came a boy with a bow and an arrow. Along came a boy with a bow and an arrow. And he said, I'll get ye, you wee cock sparrow. The boy with the arrow let fly at the sparrow. The boy with the arrow let fly at the sparrow. The boy with the arrow let fly at the sparrow. And he hit a man that was hurling a barrow. The man with the barrow come out with the arrow. The man with the barrow come out with the arrow. The man with the barrow come out with the arrow. And said, ye take me for a wee cock sparrow. The man hit the boy though he wasn't his father. The man hit the boy though he wasn't his father. The man hit the boy though he wasn't his father. And the boy stood and glowered, he was hurt to the marrow. And all this time the wee cock sparrow. And all this time the wee cock sparrow. And all this time the wee cock sparrow was chirping awa on the shan't o' the bar. In the end, I'm afraid, I grew more than a wee bit tired of that wee cock sparrow. It turned into a great big albatross around my neck. It had been my family party piece, but it became safety full. It seemed to make everyone forget all my other work. Children and grown-ups shouting after me, shouting after my daughters, coming up to me in the streets, creaking at me to sing it for them. He's a bit of the wee cock sparrow, eh? Oh, I sometimes wish I'd never done the bloody... And calling from the palace, you'll see me do no rallying, trying my steps and laying the shimmy. The land is my palace of dreams. Written, I thought, turgidly by Bridie, which he said himself, but with much funnier stuff added by the cast. The Tinter Cup ran for 4 months, could have played much longer. It was a sort of fantasticated pantomime. At one point, the Battle of Bannockburn got all mixed up with a Scotland-England rugby match. I played my first day. Now, Glasgow is the home of pantomime, but Tinter Cup was by far the most popular Christmas show that year. Posh outsiders and locals from the Gorbals crammed the theatre every night. It was a show for everyone. Everyone loved it. Oh, but when I was offered a lucrative contract to play Dame at the Alhambra for the next few years, oh, I had betrayed the legitimate theatre. I had sold out to popularity and money. I had lost my integrity. I had a family to feed. Doing panto paid 4 times as much as work at the Sits. A very earnest young fellow in the company chastised me very noisily for this loss of integrity. So I invited him round to the flat for tea. I introduced him to the girls and I said, this is the man that doesn't want you to eat. He probably disapproved of another popular show I did on television, The Vital Spark, based on the Parahandy stories by Neil Monroe. There's about a Clyde puffer, the smartest boat in the trade, and its captain, just one of Britain's hearty sons, and all the various high and low jigs. Very porky and funny they are too. We performed them live for 6 weeks to an enormous audience. One day, we had to pose for the covered photograph for the Radio Times. I was in a prankish mood that day, and I said to the others, you see that wee bird over there? Let's all look at that, that'll make a good photo. So of course, when the photograph was published, they were gawping off into the middle distance, and I was looking straight into them. A little bit of harmless fun, I thought. Well, I was dropped from that show for being difficult. One of the actors found my way of working trying. I was given a right old roasting by the director. Apparently it caused problems that I tried different ways of doing things. You'd think they'd have known. Now, I'm aware that I've acquired a bit of a reputation among some people. Don't mind me, I'll just be up the back here picking flowers, and all that sort of thing, and worse. Well, some of it earned, no doubt, some not. I don't know. Oh, my dear old friend, Duncan Macrae, had a go at me once. We were having a heated debate about something important. And I found myself saying at some point, you see, we are all in balloons. You're in your balloon and I'm in my balloon, and my job is to burst your balloon. And Fulton said to me, John, who are you to go around bursting people's balloons? That's positively fascist of you. Nevertheless, said I, some balloons have to be burst. I'd be the first to admit I have a good conceit to myself. But there's light and dark in us all, and Herr Jung says we must learn to embrace our shadow. I think you know why I called this meeting. I assume you all read the review in yesterday's Irish Independent. Well, pretty damning, wasn't it? Not impressed by the standard of acting in the company, not up to the standard of the Abbey Theatre. The reviewer was bored to tears, except when I was on stage. Any success we are enjoying over here is entirely due to my performances. I am the one getting the laughs. You may coincidentally get a laugh when you are on stage with me. These productions would be nothing without me. To be thus is nothing. But to be safely thus. Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind he hath a wisdom that doth guide his valour to act in safety. As none but he whose being I do fear. And under him my genius is rebuked, as it is said Mark Antony's was by Caesar. Well, my genius is well and truly rebuked too. I broke my blasted foot. I tried hobbling around in a plaster, but it was just ridiculous. I wish I'd had the chutzpah of Orson Welles. When he played King Lear in New York, he broke both his feet and wheeled himself around the stage. To great effect, apparently. The Swan of Avon and I have had a decidedly hot and cold relationship. It began very well with my Quince in the Dream and then went horribly wrong with Macbeth. I had broken my foot at the end of the run of Forrigan Reel, tripping over a set of bagpipes in the wings. And I made my first entrance as a Thane on the opening night in a muckle great plaster. According to Margaretta Scott, my Mrs. M, this had quite a sinister effect in the murder scene. There was such hard work, and after a couple of shows I chucked in the towel. Tyrone Guthrie said very nice things about my underplaying and my verse speaking. My Malvolio just didn't work at all. I don't know why. It should have been a perfect fit, but for some reason I looked and apparently felt uncomfortable. Oh, and my daughters hated seeing Daddy being humiliated. My last dip into Shakespearean waters was as the porter in Macbeth. A much happier encounter with the play at the Assembly Hall for the Edinburgh Festival. Now, it's only a few minutes in Act 2, so I had plenty of time with Peggy and the girls who came across for a wee holiday. Those few minutes were enough. Oh, it's cold out. Oh. Ah. Sometimes I think this bowl is kind of wee. You always come back for more. Crofter's porridge oats, toasted for traditional Scottish flavour. Pavilion Theatre, Bournemouth. Darling Anne, Easter creeps on apace, and I look forward to seeing you all then in London or elsewhere. Loot seems finally to be finding a shape, and Mr. Orton has stopped bombarding us with daily rewrites, so the cast seem much happier. Well, mostly. I'm not sure about Kenneth. We had a better than normal week at Golders Green, and came away very pleased with ourselves on Saturday after a packed house and 8 curtain calls. This is a lovely town, built on a steep, hilly rise cut up into little glens called chines. All the roads curve and turn and rise. There are no real angles. There are burns running down to the sea, quite clean and clear, and all the houses are nice, big ones. I can walk to the theatre in 15 minutes along the front and through the gardens, which are quite lovely. The theatre is pleasant, but as this is a very respectable town, we might not do so well here as we did last week. But at least, thanks to all the rewrites and re-rehearsal, the howls of disgust that greeted the play at Cambridge are behind us now. God rest the poor soul. I shall miss her. Her eyes are blue. My wife's eyes were brown. But they're not her own eyes then. Not natural. Oh, that surprises me. It's going to take me a long time to believe she's dead. She was such an active sort of person. Tragic news about your premises. Was your chapel of rest defiled? Human remains weren't outraged. Oh, thank goodness for that. There's some things that will deter even criminals. The body's laid out, waiting for burial. It's terrible thoughts that come to me. The young men thinking of nothing but the money, burrowing from the undertakers to the bank, the riches before them, the stench of corruption and the instruments of death behind them. They'd do anything for money. They'd risk damnation in this world and the next. And me, a good person by any light, walking among such people. What would they wear, do you suppose? Dust is very easily identified. Oh, surely they wouldn't work in the nude. Oh, God have mercy on them if they did. Even to avoid the hangman, I wouldn't put up with precautions of that nature. If you could get a glance between their toes, you'd find the evidence. Oh, treat her gently. She was very precious to me. For some reason, as we looked around the theatre, I was reminded of you and Christine coming backstage after the pantomimes at the Alhambra. How amazed you were by the beanstalk and Cinderella's coach, and how you wondered at the real feathers in Mother Goose's costume and the giant golden egg, and how disappointed you were when you realised the coach was all tacked together with bits of glass for jewels. Well, life's rather like that, isn't it? If you inspect it too closely, it can look pretty shabby. A lot of things look better from a distance. It's how you look at them that matters, what you see. What's the latest in smart clothes? I noticed new colours, a lot of yellows and pinks and oranges, and lots of belts and girdles. But many of the girls here are still wearing black jeans and jackboots and hair you can't see through. Mystery? No. Your guess is as good as mine. Love, that. Ladies and gentlemen, quiet, please. Did you hear about the man in the cocktail bar at the Titanic? He said, I asked for ice in my whiskey, but this is ridiculous. And now, I would remind you that you unanimously voted me chairman of this august body, and this AGM has a great deal of business to get through. Perhaps we can resume our debate about the plight of the No. 2 Variety Theatre chorus girls more constructively. Scottish Equity has a sworn duty to protect all its members and support them, great and small. And I would remind you, as your first and thus far only chairman, that so far we have worked wonders where contracts and conditions for actors are concerned. We must do no less for those who work in variety. Specifically today, we must come to a decision about how we can best improve things for the May Moxon Young Ladies Chorus Troupe. They are being treated very shabbily by the Metropole Theatre, very shabbily. These girls are receiving neither a proper wage nor an allowance for working away from home. The best way, it seems to me, to remedy this dreadful situation will be for We all seek to explain ourselves in big words and windy notions. The wise disregard these things. The Bulgarian, the quack, and the theologian are confronted with the universe. And they immediately start to talk and talk and talk. They have no curiosity. They know all about it. They create a mean structure of foolish words and phrases and say to us, this is the world. The comparative anatomist has curiosity. He's unconcerned with theories and explanations. He immediately institutes a divine search for facts. And at last, in the end, when you and I are dead, these facts will be collected together. And their sum will be the truth. Truth that shows the noblest thing in creation, how to live. Truth that shatters the idle mumbo-jumbo before which man daily debases his magnificence. If you believe in an immortal soul, why should you venerate the empty shell it has spun in its upward flight? The anatomist alone has a true reverence for the human body. He loves it. He knows it. One of Bridie's finest. Playing that role for Maury Urquhart and being seen in it by Bridie was when my amateur caterpillar began to transform into a professional butterfly. Though I can't say I agree with Dr. Knox. I don't exactly love the human body, but I do take care of it. I do like to keep it fit. And I don't like learning lines. What actor does. So I found a way of combining the two. Now, most of the places I've lived over the years, I've been lucky enough to have a back green or a back garden. Most of them square or rectangular. So when I had lines to learn, I would pace along the edge of the lawn, reciting my lines and stopping at each corner. Comme ça. As I was walking all alone, I heard twa corbies making a me. The ain until the tiller saved, for shall we gang and dine the day? I'm told that's eccentric. It puts me in mind of my performance in the Forrigan Reel. Oh, at the end of the war, we did an Ensa tour of that to France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, mostly to Scottish regiments. Went down a treat. Now, all actors in the war zone were automatically made officers and got to travel first class. So I tried telling myself, this isn't a uniform. It's just a piece of cloth made by workers in a factory. But I have to confess I grew rather too fond of all that first class travel. Any lasting pleasure in all of that was quickly squashed by seeing great cities like Hamburg in ruins and the misery of the people. What we did to Dresden was criminal. Criminal! Darling Christine, I must apologise for forgetting your birthday today. I forget so much. Oh, darling, you will never be 17 again, or 16, or 10, or 5, or even 1. Nor shall I ever be 50 again. So there is some reason to shut one's eyes to the implacable march of time for forgetting. Our wedding day, Anne's and your birthdays, and Mum's and my own birthdays, I am apt to forget them all, except the last. When selfishness go further, I don't want to be reminded of mine. I'm sorry. You can recall in future that on this day in 1966 your dad sat down and wrote of sincere regret, coloured with the autumn tones of his own age, and gleaming with the light of spring. I was thrilled to receive your long letter after the visit to St Andrews. Your observations were delightful, and I'm glad you think the other girls thought well of Anne. You can take stock of yourself after the higher results have come out. Your geography mark was great. Perhaps you'll scrape a pass in maths. I do hope so, and if not, what the hell? Life goes on just the same. Keep the heat. Keep the smile. Keep being you. I have a room here with 2 single beds and a double bed. I can't sleep that much. Love, Dad. Oh, damn this head of mine. Something's wrong. I'm not always sure, but the other day I attacked Peggy. I had to be told I'd done it. I didn't know. I don't like this memory. Oh, that's better. 1955, before live theatre, television rather, ate up live theatre and spat it out. It was the 3rd year of my touring company, doing a roaring trade, taking Scottish plays to all the earts and pearts of the country. That year we were doing Alexander Reid's marvellous play, The World's Wonder, about the adventures of the legendary Borders wizard Michael Scott in the fictional Borders borough of Doherty, before he magically departs in an old sailing boat. I have another name, an immortal name, dozens of names, dozens and dozens of names. By Tweeddale side they kent me best as Merlin. It was an Arthur's day when folk went to cased up like lobsters in bricht coats of mail and worshipped honour. In the German lands as a chiel called Faustus I aince raised the deal, aye, and got hot red hell for it. I have been at various times called Nostradamus, Zadziel, Albertus Magnus, Paracelsus. Among the Greeks, Pythagoras, Orpheus, Hermes. The truth is I've been so many men I forgot the half of them. I've been women too, but maybe let's no speak about that. I've been brunt in black Spain by the Spanish Inquisition in a yellow robe and a high-peaked dances kept 8 separate times. Or was it 9? Well, it makes more difference. I rose again up through the ashes like the phoenix bud. I have been complexioned every colour the skin can turn, black, white and saffron, brun and heath Indian red, and all the shades of tween and the combinations. Been doctor, barber, alchemist, hermit, freer, transmuted metals and brewed true love potions, invented a magic wheel and a brazen heat that answered questions. Practice near all professions except the law, whilk I could never abide. There's times I wonder why I haven't been that I can be missed. Farewell the world, farewell. Mind Michael Scott, I've set a course on the last Kent star. Gin we win through, we'll bust the bands o' space and beach the morn upon infinity. Cherish all wonder, teach the bairns to dream. There's nae sic wretches as imagination.